Hello again, everyone. Welcome to Washington Gun Law TV. I am Washington Gun Law President William Kirk. Thanks for joining us. Hey, we're going to circle back again on magazine bans. We've been spending a lot of time geeking out about that lately because, as you know, we got the huge ruling out of the Ninth Circuit, actually down in San Diego there, in the matter of Duncan v. Bonta. That was then, of course, followed up by all the shenanigans going on in the Ninth Circus or Circuit, however you want to call it. And then, of course, we had the big disappointing news here for the hometown crowd in Washington State about the lack of an injunction in the matter of Brumback v. Ferguson. So we had some good news followed by a bunch of bad news. We're due for some good news again, and, you know, I think I might have some primarily for our folks to the south of us down in Oregon. As we know, there has been a pending lawsuit about Oregon's ballot measure 114. That law has been enjoined since it was passed down in Harney County, and that case has gone to trial. And I want to kind of go back, rehash, kind of play a little armchair quarterback on it, maybe even make a couple of predictions and possibly give you a ray of hope. So today, let's spend a few minutes and let's talk about A Tale of Two States, how Oregon is likely to strike down magazine bans. Okay, so the case we're talking about today is a case called Arnold v. Brown. Now, this is a case that is filed in Harney County, Oregon, down there in southeast Oregon. The judge down there, Judge Ratio, has actually enjoined enforcement of all of ballot measure 114 since it was supposed to go into effect. Now, for those of you who don't know anything about ballot measure 114, there is a ton of videos that we did back at the time calling this one of the absolute worst pieces of gun control legislation we had ever seen. It was at the time. I mean, there's a lot of states that have completely outdone themselves since that time. But Oregon ballot measure, which was passed by a very narrow majority in the state of Oregon, not only has magazine bans, pre-purchasing licensing requirements, and multiple other civilian disarmament portions to that law. Now, a trial, a 6-day trial, concluded on Monday, September 25th, down in Harney County. It was tried before Judge Ratio. It was a bench trial. For those of you who may have been following, and I've had an opportunity to go back and take a look and listen to most of the testimony, I had an opportunity to follow several news stories that were kind of occurring during the trial, that if you are a proponent, that is, you support ballot measure 114, that is, you actually support civilian disarmament, yeah, things did not go real well for you, okay? If we're trying to read the tea leaves of how Judge Ratio handled the trial, the questioning of the witnesses, and how each side did in actually proving its case, there is a very high probability that Judge Ratio is going to strike large portions, if not all, of ballot measure 114 down as being unconstitutional. Now, the state, always desperate to try to keep its civilians disarmed, called 4 separate expert witnesses. And to give you an idea of some of the desperation that was happening here from the state of Oregon, the expert witnesses that the state of Oregon called included Dr. Michael Siegel, an epidemiologist from Tufts University, James Yergolaitis, a former ATF agent, Mark Teskov, a professor of anthropology at Southern Oregon University, and Brian DeLay, a history professor from Cal Berkeley. And of course, each and every one of them said, hey, listen, when we wrote the Oregon State Constitution, we were only talking about muskets. The anthropologist said, hey, I've excavated sites. I didn't find any high-capacity magazines in that, so therefore that is not what the Oregon State Constitution contemplated. And it's really important to remember that, as you know, in the matter of Oregon Firearms v. Federation v. Kotek, which was a case that took place in federal court in Portland, Judge Karen Ermagert found absolutely no problem with ballot measure 114. Now, we have called her ruling one of the worst rulings of the year, and we stand by that, okay? But also understand that what's being challenged here is the constitutionality of Oregon ballot measure 114 under state constitutional grounds, specifically Oregon State Constitution, Article 1, Section 27, which everyone now down there should know reads, "The people shall have the right to bear arms for defense of themselves and the state, but the military shall be kept in strict subordination to the civil power." Now, I mentioned earlier that I did not think things had gone really well. And in relying on that opinion, there were multiple newspaper articles that were kind of live covering this trial as it went on. But one in particular from Oregon Public Broadcasting states the following. Witnesses for the state faced direct scrutiny from Harney County Circuit Court Judge Robert Ratio. The at times combative inquiry from the judge highlighted the fraught debate over gun laws in Oregon and across the country. At one point, Ratio began raising hypothetical scenarios and insinuated Measure 114 might allow law enforcement to racially discriminate when enforcing it. In addition to that, the story also states Ratio had other charged exchanges indicating his skepticism of many of the experts who defended the law's provisions. And of course, one of the experts that he pushed back on was this Dr. Michael Siegel, an epidemiologist from Tufts University. Now, for those of you who don't know, epidemiology is the study of disease. We're talking about gun violence. I'm not quite sure where the causal connection is. The judge was a little confused about it as well. But the story points out Ratio pushed back at times, saying Siegel's conclusions were not scientific and chastising Department of Justice lawyers for failing to explain why Siegel's research was reliable. In fact, the judge was quoted as it related to Dr. Siegel as, "What just happened here, there is not scientific evidence. It's not my view, it's what the law requires. And I'm not going to allow that to be the testimony of an expert because it isn't scientific evidence." And in addition to that, the judge denied the state's attempt to admit any evidence from other jurisdictions outside the state of Oregon about the effectiveness of magazine bans that may have occurred in those jurisdictions. And so when you're trying to play armchair lawyer, read the tea leaves and all of that, you take a look at the tone of the questions, the type of the questions, you consider the fact that this is the judge who granted the temporary injunction and that one of the parts of the test to get a temporary injunction is that the plaintiffs are likely to prevail on the arguments. Yes, it is Washington gun law's prediction, if we look into our crystal ball here, that Judge Ratio is going to rule large portions, if not ballot measure 114 in its entirety, as unconstitutional, violating Article 1, Section 27 of the Oregon State Constitution. In particular, we believe that the magazine bans will most assuredly be struck down. The judge has said that he will rule within 60 days. If you chart that out and the judge keeps his timeline, we're looking sometime right around Thanksgiving for that ruling. Once again, the case is Arnold v. Brown. It is filed in Harney County Circuit Court. We'll link it all up down below so that all of you can geek out on it. So, while we have Judge Benitez down in San Diego saying magazine bans are absolutely positively unconstitutional. I should point out it's the second time he said it because he ruled that way in 2017 as well. And yet we got judges up in Washington State say, hey, it's no big deal. Magazines aren't even covered by the Second Amendment. The good news is I believe that the state of Oregon is going to fall down on the right side of history and the right side of the Constitution. Listen, if you have any more questions about this or anything else, you guys should know how to get a hold of Washington gun law by now. If you don't, that's okay. That information's right down there in the description box. Now, in the meantime, let's remember that part of being the lawful and responsible gun owner, like we talk about all the time here, is to know what the law is in every situation, how it applies to you in any instance that you may find yourself. Until next time, thanks for watching. And stay safe.